What is it that makes Outer Wilds so special? Is it the time loop, the puzzles, the story, the soundtrack? Of course, each person has a different answer for such an emotionally impactful game. So when I set out 2 years ago to create a game loosely inspired by Outer Wilds, I asked myself, what made it special to me specifically? What aspects do I want to steal? And what aspects do I dare to change? The main differentiating feature of Outer Wilds for me is that you progress by gathering knowledge and then synthesizing that knowledge into some kind of understanding. Unlike in most games, the notes you find are not optional lore. They are the entire game. In their behind-the-scenes footage, the developers talk about how much they struggled to make players understand that the notes are not just flavor text. The common thing you hear from first-time Outer Wilds players is, I tried it for a few hours, I saw everything there was to see, and it was neat, but I don't really get it. I think these players didn't realize that the game is actually all about the notes. The core progression of the game could honestly be a text adventure. It's like a Metroidvania for your brain. A Metroidvania game generally features one giant map with certain areas locked off, which require special items or abilities to access. Often you find an item on one side of the map which is useful everywhere, but which is especially useful for unlocking a new area, usually on the completely opposite side of the map. It's up to you to connect the dots. Outer Wilds does this, but with knowledge instead of items and abilities. You read a note, you learn something, and think, aha, I can use this fact from over here on that thing over there. One of the not so great aspects of Metroidvanias is backtracking. If you're going to hide things randomly in a giant map and let players roam free instead of holding their hand and guiding them in a straight line from start to finish, they're going to have to retrace their steps a lot to figure out what's going on, and that gets old fast. Outer Wilds features a ton of backtracking in the form of a time loop. Every 22 minutes, the whole game resets except for your memory. Now, I'm a big dummy and not very good at games, so I found myself doing the same thing over and over. There was one particular area where my character suffocated to death so many times that I almost quit. Also, I'm really busy, I have a family and a job, and I don't have a ton of time for games, so a lot of my time with Outer Wilds was frustrating. The first few times I died and experienced the time loop, it was really impactful, but it became mundane almost immediately. I would start the loop, try a few things, realize I messed something up or got myself stuck, and try to kill my character so I could start over. At its best moments, this game inspires an incredible feeling of awe and wonder, but all that flies out the window the moment you start looking for a sharp rock to impale yourself on. Still, the time loop is an important and necessary part of Outer Wilds. It serves an indispensable role in the game's story, theme, and philosophy, which all fit together perfectly. I just disagree with that philosophy, and I want my game to showcase a different philosophy. One thing Outer Wilds gets right is the puzzles. The puzzles are anything but obscure. Every time I figured out a puzzle solution in Outer Wilds, I thought, that's it? That's all I have to do? It was right in front of me the whole time? That's exactly the feeling I want to inspire with my puzzles. The solutions in Outer Wilds are incredibly simple. Things like, stand here, or look at this thing. Some of them are so simple that people solve them accidentally. And if that's not enough, you will eventually find a note that spells it all out for you. All the puzzles are straightforward once you've read the right notes and pieced everything together. Most puzzle games aim to make you feel smart, but Outer Wilds made me feel dumb. Everything is simple in hindsight, which makes you realize how small your brain really is, and that's exactly what I'm going for in my game. In Outer Wilds, you can propel yourself along any of the 3 dimensions, left, right, up, down, and forward, backward. Then you have your usual 2 camera axes, pitch and yaw, and you can also roll for a total of 6 degrees of freedom. This can be overwhelming even for a seasoned player of first-person games, which usually have 4 degrees of freedom. Don't get me wrong, Outer Wilds does a phenomenal job of making this complexity as accessible as possible, starting with the absolutely brilliant tutorial. But despite the game's best efforts, the reality is there are a whole lot of people who might enjoy a game like Outer Wilds if it didn't require so much dexterity. It prevents me from recommending the game to casual players. The movement model in my game is largely inspired by Tiny Wings, a chill, super casual iPhone game. I want the movement to be fun and relaxing low-level challenge in the background while you're puzzling away. The ship computer, in my mind, encompasses the entirety of Outer Wilds. It's basically a ledger of everything you've discovered so far. There are 2 different views, but in my playthrough I only ever used what I like to call the murder board view. The board has a little photograph of every notable thing that you've seen. Click on the photograph and you see a list of facts, which you learned from the notes in that area. Almost always, the notes in one area pertain to a different area of the game. In other words, when you're exploring Planet A, you usually found notes about some location on Planet B. This is a really genius design decision. You always have leads to follow up on. If you're ever stuck wondering what to do next, you just go to your ship computer and look for missing pieces. You can track your progress in Outer Wilds by how much of the board you've uncovered. That said, I'm not sure even the developers fully understood this because the game doesn't emphasize the ship computer as much as it should. It feels like a fun little optional thing. You know, just like the notes, optional flavor text and lore, right? So I'm stealing the ship computer idea, but with a few modifications. The murder board should be introduced right at the beginning of the game, and it should be available at all times. You shouldn't have to hike back to some remote location just to be able to read your own notes. The developers of Outer Wilds describe it as a game about truth in systems. What does that mean? Well, it's the opposite of what most game developers do, which is to fake everything. For example, instead of simulating the entire water cycle of the Earth, we pick a skybox image and throw in some cloud particles. Or instead of writing a proper train system, we have an NPC wear a train as a hat, like in Fallout 3. Outer Wilds strives to do everything for real. It doesn't lock the planets into a predetermined orbit, it actually simulates them as physical objects. Everything in Outer Wilds has an explanation. The developers worked insanely hard to close every plot hole and answer every question. There's no ambiguity left. It's a machine. And what's amazing is the story and philosophy of the game has that same message. The universe is a cold, uncaring machine that will kill your little meat sack body in a million different ways. The highest moral good is to accept the futility of our world and soldier on anyway, forging our own meaning out of the meaningless machines. It's a really compelling idea. So I'm doing the opposite of that. What would a game look like that is the opposite of truth in systems? I don't know, but I found a video essay recently that gave me a hint. The video is about the 2 biggest PC games of the 1990s, Myst and Riven. Myst was the first big game by Cyan Worlds. It took the world by storm in 1993, and it captured my own imagination years later when I played it for the first time. It was billed as the surrealistic adventure that will become your world. The sequel, Riven, came out 4 years later, and for many complicated reasons it didn't have quite the same impact as Myst, both on the culture as a whole and on myself personally. And yet most critics agree it is strictly a better game than Myst in almost every way. The graphics are more realistic, the puzzles are so tightly integrated into the world that you hardly notice them. Everything fits together perfectly. It is a masterpiece, just like Outer Wilds. Contrast this with the original Myst. It looks a bit goofy in comparison to Riven. Why is there an organ inside a spaceship? Why is there a bizarre tree elevator? Nothing quite makes sense. It's almost like these worlds exist solely for the benefit of a person sitting at a computer solving puzzles. Over the years, Cyan has released many remakes of the original Myst, and each one brings it more in line with Riven. Of course, the graphics improve with each remake, but there are other changes as well which try to patch up little embarrassments and oddities from the original game. And yet, this video essay calls for one more remake, one that updates the game for modern sensibilities while maintaining that mystique and magic of the original. It has some magical element which the modern remakes purposefully strip out. And what is that magical element? I think the key is in the blurb, the surrealistic adventure that will become your world. The key word for me is surreal, a dreamlike quality. Myst didn't always make sense logically, but it was very earnest and genuine, flaws and all. I want to make a game that is surreal, a bit arbitrary, and not entirely understandable. I'm trying to repress the urge to answer every question, fix all the problems. This is very difficult because it means I have to kill my ego and stop trying to make a masterpiece. I have to throw out all my measures of success and instead try to make a game that only I could make. Not because I'm the only one smart enough, but because I'm the only me. And that means the game must be flawed and quirky, because that's how I am. Thank you for joining me on this journey and taking a peek at this impossible project. I hope you can take something encouraging away from all the ramblings. And I hope to see you again in another video soon.